Okay, we're on. Hey guys, welcome to the Game Audio Hour. This is Game Audio Hour number 47. And of course, this is a weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here is where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And I'm not Kyle, but I am going to do what he usually does, which is kick it off to our wonderful panel here. So first of all, hey Alex, how are you doing?
Vince, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I trust you've enjoyed a fine holiday of sweet California sunshine, good wines. What did you get up to?
Oh, let's see. It actually got a little nippy a couple of days. Somewhere in the teens.
Was you actually had to put on a pair of jeans, did you?
Yes, I did. It was pretty cold, but it quickly got its wits about it, and California is now back to balmy 80-degree weather. It is 80 degrees in LA, no joke. So
I have to work out what 80 degrees is in Celsius.
oh, like around 32 maybe, 33.
Seriously? That's pretty hot.
Yeah.
Maybe you mean 22 or 23.
Is that right? Oh man, I can't remember. Maybe 22, 23. I used to be really good on this Celsius Fahrenheit thing.
Well, over here, it got down to about freezing point over here over the New Year holiday. So we had a fair bit of snow, and my family and we did absolutely nothing except one interesting lesson in game design I learned from my 5-year-old. Up until now, we've been playing the card game Solitaire. I think you call it Solitaire in the States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we call it Patience in British English-speaking countries, also called Klondike, I think. We usually play it on the iPad, and my 5-year-old, I told him, we can actually play this with real cards. So he said he wanted to see that. And actually the rather inconvenient process of laying the cards out on the table and actually like moving the cards all by hand was such a revelation for him that he loved it so much, and the excitement level was completely different. He said, "Daddy, I never want to play this on the iPad again." So the whole week was basically alternating between playing Lego and playing Patience with real cards. So he's taken his first tentative steps into the greater, wider world of traditional gameplay, tabletop gameplay.
Wow,
so that was my New Year break.
That's really awesome to hear. That sounds great. And let's go to Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Vince. I'm enjoying the same balmy weather you are. As you know, we dropped down to 30 degrees or so around New Year's Eve, which is fine for the rest of the world, but we've come to expect a higher standard of meteorology here in Southern California, so I'm pleased that it's gotten back to reasonable shape outside. In other fronts, I've begun an in-depth study on the audio, interactive, and otherwise of Dragon Age Inquisition, a.k.a. my playing Dragon Age Inquisition for several hours a day. So I will let you know the results when I'm done in probably 70 to 200 gaming hours from now.
Oh, okay. So you're going to be ready with a full dissertation for us by Game Audio Hour number 48, I hope.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the plan.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. And let's move on to, is that Matt?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hey,
welcome.
guys.
Good to see you here. How are you doing over there?
I'm great. You know what? Let's be honest. I am never on time, so I'm glad that you guys allowed me to join. And are we talking about our New Year's?
A little bit, yeah. How was it for you?
It was good. It was freezing here, and I DJ'd this party, and it was really weird because I had to be sober for the whole night. And drunk people are super annoying.
When you're sober, yes, this is true.
Yeah, like when you're drunk with them, it's like super fun. It's great. But this night I was, we had one of the DJs dropped out because they had a family member die. So I had to cover almost the entire night. And yeah, it was just like really, really sloppy. I'm just like, we as a people need to learn to handle our liquor a little bit better.
So are you suggesting that we should be started earlier on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Not like now. Maybe like in February.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. We do not condone underage drinking here on Game Audio Hour, of course.
I personally do. No, just kidding.
All right.
So we need to put in a word for our esteemed, gregarious, charismatic, legendary host, Carl Johnson, who,
Yes.
As you can see, has gone a little hairy. He's gone a bit shaggy over there.
Yeah. He played a
poor
little
Carl.
too much Legend of Zelda, and somehow he is currently stuck in the dark world, and he hasn't yet found that mirror so that he can maintain his human state.
Yeah, he's left an avatar of a fluffy pink sheep for us to talk to.
I actually love that.
Yeah, I think this
It is
show,
a bit of an ominous.
it could be a little better if all of us had our own fluffy personas that we would turn into for this episode.
Okay.
Well, I can. There we go. I'm ready.
All right, hold on.
You're ready? Oh, darn it. I got nothing here. What do I got? I got nothing. That's my Iwi count, maybe?
Yeah, that's pretty fluffy.
Yeah. All right.
All right, guys.
But seriously, let's talk about some game audio here. I actually spent a little bit of time this week.
That's pretty freaky.
Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to try my best to not be freaked out by that, Matt.
Sorry, it's my daughter's. She's weird.
Another coming out.
It's cute.
Yeah. If you like, things that the devil's into.
Yes, it's cute in a very creepy way.
Yeah.
So, I spent a little bit of time, actually, over the break thinking about how to talk about this whole implementation topic, because I think we can all agree it's a very big topic with a lot of different ways to explore and explain what exactly audio implementation is. But I have a couple of examples here from a small game that I worked on that talks a little bit about implementation and how a really simple sound could be implemented in a couple of different ways. And I figure it might be cool to show you guys what I've got here. So hopefully you don't mind me taking this platform.
Oh, that's great.
Talking about this. Yeah, so over on my other screen here, I've got FMod, and FMod is going to play some sounds here. Yeah, it's a sound of a laser gun shot. I'm gonna talk about this laser gun for a bit because did a really small iPad game where you have to shoot things. And at the very beginning of the project, I was thinking about what is required when it comes to shooting things, and I thought the obvious thing first, which is you're gonna shoot a bullet. When that bullet fires, you're going to play the sound of a bullet firing. It wasn't until later that they told me, oh, it's actually a laser shot. It's not a gunshot. But also beyond that, they told me that it wasn't really individual bullets. They didn't want the sound of individual projectiles being fired, but rather the sound of the state of this character firing, and not the sound of each individual shot. So here in FMod, I'm going to do my individual laser gun shot. I'll just play that a couple of times. It's got the usual FMod stuff that we would do with a gunshot, so it's a slightly random volume on each shot, a slightly random pitch on each shot. And in the code that they were using, it's just a matter of saying, hey, FMod, play sound 3D laser shot. It's just literally one line of code that gets called. But that's not the way they wanted to do it. They wanted the sound of the state of being in a firing state, rather than the sound of each individual gunshot. So let's look at this laser gunshot that I have again, and I'm going to play this. Right now it's playing, And I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to turn it off now. Just alternating back and forth between turning this thing on and off.
Can I just ask a question at that point? Why did they want to have that state of firing versus state of not firing? Is it because the weapon is automatic?
Yeah, they wanted a full automatic weapon sound. You wouldn't actually be able to fire a single shot, even if you wanted to.
Then I guess the question then is that I assume that the timing of the shots that we're hearing when it's being what is actually being done. The timing is being decided by FMod or by the game.
The timing in this case is being decided by FMod. The graphic, the visual for this firing is actually pretty indistinct. You can't actually make out individual shots.
Okay, right. Yeah, that was going to be my question. Like, if it's decided by FMod, then how is it that how can they synchronize what you're seeing, the projectiles coming out, together with the timing that's being worked out by FMod? But if it's indistinguishable, then yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Okay, please continue.
Yeah, they don't have to do that. So let's see. Let me switch the screen by turning this thing on again. Yo, what's up?
Yeah. So I'm noticing, and this is something that I've been curious about. It specifically has to do with FMod, and I don't want to derail the conversation. If you think it's going to derail it, then we can just stop it. But you have a setting right there that says one shot no. But there's also a setting within FMod when you pull the sample in that you call the loop. So I've always wondered what the difference is. And to the best of my knowledge, the one shot no just once that plays, the voice is taken up. So that will stay around even if you're not hearing the sound.
Yes, that is correct. If a sound event in FMod is one shot no, it's never going to kill itself. Even if the sound definitions that are inside the sound event are one shot in and of themselves.
Okay.
The sound event will persist.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So this is actually kind of funky because I've got this sound definition. And I'm going to go into this sound definition now. And you can see that there's a couple of things that are going on. There is a spawn property that is here. Spawn time. And spawn time is kind of a useful thing, and they don't really do a good job of exposing it. But it allows you to do basically continuous pseudo-granular synthesis with WAV files. And you've got these two numbers here. Before, they were actually the exact same number. They were at 100 milliseconds. And so basically every 100 milliseconds, this one-shot wave sound is going to respawn itself and give you a continuous stream of sound. The guys wanted something that was a little less continuous, so I gave them this little edit. And it's going to be as quick as 70 milliseconds between each shot and as slow as 160-some milliseconds between each shot. They just liked the sound of that a little bit better than unevenness. So, I mean, that is a really simple sound definition that plays continuously from a single WAV file. You can do this with multiple WAV files if you want, but this is just really bare bones simple.
Isn't there an event on the other side? If you create a simple event, isn't there also a granular system as well?
There is actually. And if I go to this one in FMod.
It's the same concept. Yeah.
Yep, same concept. And there's a menu there that will let you select a granular playback mode. What's kind of funny with FMod is that at least this old version, FMod Designer, is that they make it really easy to do granular type sounds when you make a simple event, but they don't expose it as easily if you're making a complex event with lots of envelopes, which can be really frustrating for some people if they're just starting out into FMod.
Yeah, it's, you know what, I honestly, like, I've used FMod now in a project for over a year and a half, and that never occurred to me, what you showed me just now, so thanks, bro.
Oh, okay, no problem.
I was doing the granular through the simple event, and it's good for a lot of things, like especially like ambient emitters. I find it to be really good for that.
Yeah.
I think it's real uneven and natural. But that's cool.
Cool, cool. So back to this laser shot that I've got about entering a firing state versus not. I've got a parameter that's up over the top from 0 seconds to 1 second. The screen keeps on switching when I speak, but let me just play it again so that you can see this parameter that's going to be right below firing primary. So in code, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to trigger my sound to play back, instead what I'm saying is I am going to have a parameter that is on the sound that is already playing and change that parameter to 1 when I'm firing and change it back to 0 if I'm not firing. And it's actually a really simple concept, and it's very simple to implement in code. But if you don't know that you actually have that as a possibility, you're not going to think about doing that with your sound design, and you might not think about doing a machine laser gun with that type of granular synthesis.
What's the benefit of using a parameter to switch it on and off instead of just using a start event and a stop event?
Well, with the start event and stop event, if you stop an event, it just outright kills the event. If you actually change the parameter from 1 to 0, it looks at how the sound definition occupies the layer in the sound event, and it will actually allow the sound definition to play out its content. So the wave file will naturally tail off as opposed to just being hard cut off.
I see.
You could also do a key off. I don't know if you've messed around with the key offs at all.
You could do key off. I found key off actually in FMod to be really annoying.
I've used it mainly for like this type of thing. So the way I've done it is I would have 3 layers. I'd have a start layer, a looping layer, and then that looping layer could be that same type of granular file. And then I have like an out, and so I just set a time parameter that basically kicks me through the start to the sustain point of, say, 0.5. And then I have the key off, and I'll draw a volume fade out, and then have another separate sound that's the fade out. But I think this is much more simple and elegant in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a simplicity to it. I kind of like doing that. I know about the key off, but quite honestly, I've experienced some bugs with FMod Designer when doing key off, especially with multi-layered sound events. So I tend not to do the key off thing.
Yeah, I'm using it with CryEngine, and it works pretty well. But I had to get custom events given to me where I can access the key off within what they have their own scripting language. So I just access it that way.
Yeah.
What is it called? I'm trying to think of it's basically Kismet, not Kismet. Yes, Kismet essentially, or Blueprint, the new updated Unreal scripting language.
Yeah. Kismet's cool. I like Kismet. Are they still using Kismet in the new Unreal, or?
Unreal 4 uses Blueprint, which is amazing because it actually, Unreal 4 is honestly my favorite engine right now. I'm only using it on one of my projects, but it's got this great. The blueprint is relatively easy to understand. There's a lot that you can do with it, like a ton of stuff you can do with it, just with like Unreal Engine Audio and Blueprint together. It actually traces. It shows you. So if you're adding sound to some event that's happening, you'll actually see the graph that lights up and shows you where it's at, which is
that's cool.
awesome. It's really easy to find where you need to hook things up.
All right, so that means basically I should get right into Blueprint right now.
Yeah, if you're using it on a project, even if you're not, I mean, I've actually built levels with Unreal just from scratch, just for fun. You know, like put like just crazy lights and crazy sounds, like nothing that anyone would want to play or should play, but it's just fun to kind of like, you know, create your world.
Oh man, that's cool. So, yeah, so we've got this FMod, these different sound events. I actually have a little bit of code that actually shows what it is that I'm dealing with when I'm actually implementing this. I'm going to go to my screen sharing and share another screen, if I can.
Are you still with us there, Mike?
I am. I'm not an expert in the subject, so I'm probably learning as much as our viewership.
And as much as Bar McBar is learning. He's certified. With the knowing silence. He's quiet, but you know he knows his shit, so you don't want to cross him.
I'm really too intimidated to ask him any questions.
It's that steely glare.
I want to get that notepad up with some code, but it's not going to do it.
Oh, you're not seeing it? I can see it perfectly fine.
It's probably because your audio is coming out of FMod, not coming out of Notepad.
Vincent, can I recommend something?
Yo.
I don't know if it has anything to do. Oh, never mind. I thought that maybe the project was named here. So you might want to be careful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's not. Let's see. It's not too complicated. Some of this code that I wanted to show.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's really simple stuff. But it's basically the difference between, you know, Sound Manager, Play Sound 3D, Laser Shot, you know, at a volume, at a position, you know, that, and you know, setting up some code that allows you to spawn these gun sounds whenever something else is spawning in the game, versus having a gun sound and doing, in this case, gun sound dot set parameter firing 1. You know.
Yeah.
And it's but it's also something that I wanted to sort of jump off that into a question to you guys. You know, sound implementation is not something that I learned formally when I was in school. I didn't actually really do game audio when I was in school. I just sort of toyed around with games until I figured out, oh, here's how games are kind of constructed, and then I'll do audio along with that stuff. So learning how games overall were constructed helped inform me when it comes to how I should construct my game sounds, the sounds themselves, the projects and those assets that I was going to include with the game. How did you guys learn to implement audio in your earliest games?
Well, for me, I think the first game that I did heavy implementation in was, let's see, which one was it? Might have been Metroid Prime 2, and I specifically asked to learn how to do it from them, and so they allowed me to come down and sort of see how it worked, because before that I'd mainly been a sound designer that threw things over the fence. So I camped out in Austin for a while. Yeah, I live here now, but I camped out. I wasn't living there at the time. So I camped out and just learned the basics, like learned, you know, because there's like, when you don't know how it's done at all, you have no idea. It's all this like this sort of mystical art form. So for me, I just sat down and I learned just the core principles. Like there's 3D sounds, there's 2D sounds. You can fire a sound off a scripting system. You can fire a sound in code. You can fire a sound in an animation, off a particle. There's just tons of different ways to do it. And everything kind of works, like every engine is essentially that. Every 3D engine is basically like, when this thing happens, this can happen, and here's a way to do it. And like the animation is an easy one because the animation is just like, okay, now you can see the animation in this editor, and you can tag footsteps or tag movement, and you know that that 3D sound is going to parent itself to whatever entity that you're tagging the sound to. But yeah, I just did that, and then the next game I did was a Chinese MMO called Warrior Epic, and that was the first one that I actually had to build on my computer at home, and I just messed around with it all the time because it was a great way to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just had all the tools right there. So, yeah, that's how I learned, and I think that it really took me about 4 years to get very good at it.
Okay. Cool. How about you guys, Alex?
Well, I'm quite inexperienced in implementation. I'm only up to my third project as far as implementing audio in the game. The first two were 2D games and very, very primitive, really primitive. Like so primitive that basically I didn't have much of the control at all. I'm just basically giving assets to the programmer who's just going to put it in, and then I go through and with a big piece of paper and listen to the game and write down everything that I want done with it, you know. And then the programmer went and did everything. So really old-fashioned and very, very difficult because, you know, having to go through and then write, okay, this one minus this much volume and that one a bit there and this one over that side. And it was very, very, very awkward. Then I got chucked in the deep end on the third project that I'm still working on at the moment. Suddenly, all of a sudden, having to use Wise, and it's all of a sudden it's a 3D VR game. So having to learn Wise and having to understand and then learn going from a 2D game to a 3D game, not only a 3D game but a VR game, is or has been incredibly challenging. Especially Wise. Wise is it's an amazing, amazing tool when you understand how to use it. But when you're on the outset of learning it, it's so intimidating because it looks but ugly. It looks terrible, and it looks completely inaccessible and uninviting. I mean, FMod, you can see that the idea there is they're trying to make it accessible to musicians who are used to looking at these horizontal DAW displays and making it sort of relatively easy to slip into, trying to understand how it all works. But Wise just says, you know, screw that. You know, these are the tools and the functions that you need, so we're just going to give it to you them in the raw form. And because of that, to actually on the setting out to learn Wise is really, really intimidating. There's a lot that you have to cover just to get the basics down.
I was the exact opposite from you.
Oh, really?
I took to Wise super easily, and FMod was more of a challenge.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
Because
actually, I haven't had much experience with FMod. I mean, I only speak from just looking at, you know, videos of people using it.
if you go from using FMod if you go from using Wise to using FMod, there's just so much lacking there. At least in the earlier Studio or the earlier Designer version. I've not used Studio, so I can't really say what they've done since. But Wise makes a lot of sense to me. Have you messed around with the MIDI stuff in Wise yet?
No, we're not using any of the MIDI stuff in Wise, but I see how it works. It looks great.
I played with it a bit. I was really excited about it, but I kind of find it a little too limiting to use. We messed around today with this program called Rev, which is a Wise plugin. And it's a granular plugin. It basically takes the harmonics of whatever sound you're using and then basically gives you a cool GUI. And you essentially give it an RTPC and can scrub through a sample.
Wow.
It's really meant for cars, but yes, it's neat. Anyway, it's a derailment.
Yeah, in the current project that we're using a lot of Wise real-time synthesis stuff because, you know, I'm a synth head at heart. So when I see that Wise can do this in real time, was very primitive, just very primitive subtractive synthesis, but it can do it. So great, let's go, let's do it. And so, so a lot of the game that we're working on at the moment, actually all of the sound effects, because I'm a masochist, all of the sound effects in the game are all synthesized. Also, because I couldn't record to save myself. So
that's really cool. Actually, I'd love to hear that.
So other than the, we started off actually also with synthesized voices. Because I thought, if I'm going to do this all synthesis, I'm going to do it all synthesis. So I tried to synthesize all the voices. And that was actually really fun and really interesting and quite convincing. Fortunately, I didn't have to synthesize that much speech. It was mostly just voice to sound like speech.
Right.
And that, of course, doing that in Wise is a whole lot of fun because you've got all this, control over. If you're triggering some speech playback or sample, you can randomly choose a point from where in the sample you want to start the playback so that it's different every time. You just have like one long 1 minute loop of this sort of speech and then just start it at different points to have sort of different speech patterns.
Like Animal Crossing, sort of.
Yeah, sort of like the old Peanuts, Charlie Brown, you remember the muted trumpet talking? Yeah. So that was a whole lot of fun, but in the end we decided it didn't really... taking it to that degree of synthesis was a bit extreme, so I've had to reluctantly record some voices, nervously, not really sure what I'm doing here, but here we go, press record, and the rest of it is all synthesized. Anyway, so because of that, coming into Wise and seeing that Wise is capable of the synthesis within the engine, oh great, well, that saves me a lot of trouble, I just do it right here. Cool. So that's been a lot of fun, but I think I'll recommend for anybody who's interested in learning Wise, one of the most important things that I found was Wise to me, it seems like it's a system that it's very difficult to just sort of start off with the basics. You sort of need to understand a large amount of how it works in order to get the basics. And so I'll definitely recommend that instead of just sort of trying to study it in preparation for maybe having to use it, it's probably a better idea to have a project and have a clear objective. This is what I want to achieve with the sound in the game, so let's go and do that right now.
I think everyone that wants to get into video games should download Wise and the Cube demo and replace the sound.
And which demo was that?
There's a Wise and Cube demo. I'll put it up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good materials for learning Wise, and of course there's Damien Cosbell's fantastic Project Adventure, this huge PDF that he's written, basically walking you through implementing game sound in Wise in a 3D kind of game from the very, very beginning to the very, very end. It's a huge, it is a huge amount of reading and it's a huge amount of studying basically, but once you get into it and start to, if you have a clear goal of what it is that you want to achieve immediately, so for example, you know what the project scope is and you know what the goals are from the game audio point of view, is rather than just sort of trying to study it first, just getting your hands dirty is the best way to learn Wise, because it can be intimidating, especially if you've never really done much work like this before.
I've got something up called a comment tracker. I'm not exactly sure how to post this.
Oh.
You should go to our chat page.
Chat.
It's gameaudiohour.com/live. Actually, I can do it for you. I'll do it for you.
So, Alex, since you're using Wise right now, I'm interested, how much time do you spend in Wise, and how much time do you find yourself actually messing with low-level code?
Because I generally suck at code, no time messing with low-level code.
Okay.
But that's just me. That's not specifically a Wise workflow issue. It's just me. I find that Wise gives me all the control that I could want over the things that I want to do, and it gives the programmer a nice kind of hands-off, okay, just tell me the event that I need to call, and that's all there. So yeah, the actual coding aspect I've never actually needed. So in a 3D VR game, which is fairly complicated as far as game audio goes, I haven't found myself in a situation where I've sort of run up against a wall and needed to mess with code.
That's cool. I think for me, I found that all the games that I've worked on where I do FMod, I feel like I have to touch code on some level in order to get the effects that I want. Either because of limitations with FMod Designer and the fact that the tool is not very good at giving me all the auditioning capabilities that I would like to be able to hear the thing that I've designed the way that I want, or because I actually want to build a little bit more feature-wise into the sound design, and I actually do have to use some of the lower-level stuff in the FMod API to make the sound that I want. But I've heard so many people who have been working in Wise say, yeah, the Wise editor is significantly better than FMod Designer. And FMod Studio is, of course, the new FMod. And a lot of people would say that FMod Studio has certainly caught up to Wise in terms of the features and how robust the auditioning, the editor tool is. But I still think Wise actually has a leg up in that department.
So for you, for Matt and Vince, if you were needing to recommend, so for example, say somebody's just starting out in game audio and they're more a music kind of person. They've done the music and they've put together the sound effects that are needed, and the programmer says, right, we need to choose some middleware. What do you want to use? So they actually have a choice between all the different options for middleware out there. For a smaller scale, say mobile game, what would you guys recommend as a starting out tool?
Wise is great.
Yeah. It depends on your engine. If you're in Unity, there's like Audio Toolkit, which is pretty decent. But I would say Wise is kind of a no-brainer because if your budget's under, say, $100,000, I think licensing Wise is like maybe $1,500 or something like that.
Yeah, if you have a really, really minuscule project and you have very little need for lots of sounds, if it's just merely a dozen different sound events and music and whatnot, then you can totally get away with Wise for free. If you want to do a little bit more than that, you do find yourself having to pay for Wise for a license. If you are using Unity, there's also Fabric, which is a great tool. It's not quite as powerful as a Wise or an FMod, but it does have some really big advantages to it. It's made strictly using Unity tools, and you don't actually have to compile it using Unity Pro. If you make a Unity project that wants FMod or Wise with it, you actually have to have Unity Pro in order to build the project. But if you use Fabric, which is a nice streamlined audio middleware tool specifically for Unity games, you can use regular old Unity and not Unity Pro. That's a big plus.
Where are the limitations with Fabric, or what can't it do that FMod and Wise can do?
Well, the interactive music for one. Also, like some of these like other smaller tools, they'll have a profiler or a concept of a profiler, but it's more like an old school profiler where you just get a spam list of tons of sounds. Like the beautiful thing about the profiler in Wise is like you can actually scroll through the timeline and kind of hone into where something is happening, where you want to adjust the mix.
Yeah, one thing. Wise has also the 3D view where you can actually see the position of the emitters in 3D space if you're in a 3D game, which is pretty incredible.
I think the biggest thing that I think Wise has the advantage over pretty much any tool is when handling looping events and starting and stopping a sound. Like we were just talking with Vince when he was showing the FMod project, and we're talking about, well, you use this type of event. You don't want to. If you want it to play out when you stop the sound. In Wise, that's a non-issue. It's so much easier to do that in Wise, I think. There's a concept in FMod of music versus sound effects. They're sort of handled separately. In Designer, anyway, there's no this music channel. It's just there's a music volume. There's one music volume. and so everything else is handled at the file level. So, I mean, I'm sure Studio's better, so I can't dog it too much, but I know that, at least with the integration with CryEngine, they're using an old version of Designer. It's like from 2009. And it is ridiculously limiting, because I did a game with Wise in 2009, and Wise was light years beyond it. If you want to call a music event in Wise, you just call it an event, just like anything else. If you want to call a music event in FMod, you have to enable the music system if you want to play it through the music system, which is interactive, but not quite as interactive. Not even remotely close to what Wise.
The end result, I would say, is if you are using an older FMod Designer-based project, you're probably not going to use the FMod music system at all, even though it does have some interactive possibilities. It's very limiting. It's very frustrating because you can't use the FMod Designer sound type effects in the FMod music system.
Right.
But to its credit, FMod Studio is significantly better, and it's almost on parity with Wise, almost. I think that it's still just not where Wise is right now.
Can I ask a software design question? Do you think that the interface paradigm that FMod has chosen for itself with this timeline, is that any kind of a limitation on the functionality that they're trying to do? Are they sort of trying to push this square peg into a round hole by resorting to this horizontal timeline?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's that then.
I mean, I think it's an annoyance that I have to deal with. There's a structure to your more complicated sounds that totally bypasses the timeline that they show you right up front. I just don't think that it works out very well. It's actually to their detriment to show that timeline first, I think.
At its very definition, game audio is real time. And even though we want to be comfortable and think of it in our Logic Pro or Cubase sort of way, that's not what it is. And I think Wise does a great job of demonstrating, this is just an object and it happens in the world. And these are the types of playbacks you can use. And the event system in Wise is I can do a game with basically just the scripting and the event system in Wise. And that's not true anything else.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting when we first were surveying the options, looking at the two big ones, FMod and Wise, and we saw that at first impression, as somebody who'd never used middleware before, of course, I look at FMod and say, oh, I see. Yeah, that's a timeline. Looks just like Logic, or just looks like Reaper, or whatever. That's got to be more intuitive and easier to learn. Then after having used FMod for about 7 months, I've been using Wise for about 7 months. Just as you just said, you realize that the core of the engine, the core of the whole game audio concept there, when you got that as a timeline, which is linear, which goes from here to here and then stops, doesn't really fit with the game, what most of the things that you want to do in game audio. Unlike Wise, where, as you said, the event system, definitely, this is one mistake I made, and if you're interested in learning Wise, listen to this. The one mistake I made is that I underestimated the importance of events in Wise, so I tried to learn all the different kinds of sound assets that you can create in Wise, and you've got these switch containers, and you've got these music containers, and all this. Tried to understand that before I had actually got a grasp of the power of events in Wise. So I actually kind of learnt it the wrong way around. If I'd started by just focusing on events and realizing that, I see, the programmer calls these events, and then Wise receives that call and then does whatever you tell it to do inside that event, and here are all the things that you can do, and this does that, and this does that, and this does that. And if I'd learned it like that, it would have been a lot easier. But now I see, as you said, Matt, the trying to make it, I assume that FMod does it on a timeline to make it accessible for digital musicians. But really, yeah, the Wise's event system is every time I use it, pull over the event editor, you just end up grinning. It's like, oh, this is really easy. You just, there you go, there it is, and everything you want is right there in your list of what this event does, and then just tell the program, okay, call that one, and it's all done.
I'm super proud of this, but I did a Wii game in 2010 and kept all of the UI at under 300K, and there were 45 UI sounds. And I did it by bringing in tiny chunks and Ys and then sequencing the events.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You could do that in FMod, but I think that, and it would maybe even make a little bit more sense, but I loved it in Wise because I could actually set the pitch on a per instance base rather than a global base. And I really enjoyed that. You obviously have to do some annoying things like a reset pitch once you finish this, and it gets complicated, but I was pretty proud of that.
Okay, Vince, so what's just to keep the discussion balanced, what is it that FMod does better than Wise?
You know what? I'm going to think about that for a moment because I would need to really seriously think about that. But I'm actually wondering what Michael might have to say on this about dealing with implementing audio and music.
I have some interesting anecdotes, but they all fall outside of the mainstream middleware that people are using today. They kind of are the old roll up your sleeves and build everything yourself. So you might want to bring, since I would be I don't want to interrupt the flow of the Wise mod discussion unless you're happy to move on from there.
Well, I got to say, when it comes to the FModWise thing, obviously they're the big ones. There's so much information on both of those tools. I'm currently still using FMod on all the projects that I'm working on, either the old FMod Designer or FMod Studio, actually. And having used both FMod and Wise, I can't help but think that, wow, Wise really does have it together when it comes to the design of their tool and encouraging really advanced stuff when it comes to design concepts. I'm always interested in seeing what guys are doing outside of that space. So I'd love to hear what you've got to say.
Well, there's some of the more interesting experiences I've had are less commercially visible. I was involved on one side on the design and implementation of an adaptive music system for a real-time strategy game called Empire Earth 3. That one was a little more contemporary than my earlier experiences, and what we did isn't greatly differentiable from what you would do today using middleware. There were small pieces of music that were in layers, and the layers could switch in and out, and really we just kind of did a lot of work on our own to implement things that today could probably be done more easily with tools. Probably the more interesting experiences I had were at the, I don't want to say the dawn, but let's say the early morning breakfast time of interactive audio in the mid to late 90s, when I was working for a startup that had some really ambitious AI technology for characters. They really wanted characters that had very complicated goal systems and had emotional systems, and they wanted a kind of overseeing AI to look at the game from the standpoint of how exciting is it right now, and if things are getting boring, can I intervene like a benevolent deity and just kind of nudge events to make them more exciting? And all of these ideas were implemented in a single programming language built from scratch just for AI called Gertie, named after Gertie the dinosaur from the annals of early animation. And what was cool about having so many parts of the game implemented by the same decision-making language, each part could kind of peek into what the other part was doing. So a character could walk around and cheat by looking at the drama manager and saying, hey, is something really exciting going to happen? Should I be in this part of the screen so that my reaction is more visible? There's a lot of interesting epiphenomenal things you could have from the interaction of all the different elements of this world. So where music was involved is we decided that the music engine, and I guess the sound engine as well, was going to use the same exact AI as all the characters and this kind of dungeon mastery overseeing drama system. So I had basically a programming language at my disposal, which for your timers was kind of Lisp-like, but had parallel processing and really complicated reactive logic, so you could interrupt a task, go to another task, and come back to the original task, which are all really useful from the standpoint of music. So we were able to do neat things like start a musical segue, a really big, ambitious one, because we knew that a big dramatic event was going to happen in exactly 13 seconds. But if that event suddenly didn't happen, like the player swerved and did something that we weren't expecting, we could trigger a reverse segue to get back exactly where we left off. And because all these, the character and the game's drama system were all implemented identically, it was very easy for them to swap information. So it was really cool to be able to do kind of these forebears of a lot of contemporary adaptive audio techniques, but in a completely different way and basically from scratch. What were some other interesting examples? We could see how many characters were visible to the player. We could look at a character's emotional state, like not the player's emotional state, but an on-screen character, and say, well, this guy's really bummed out. We can take that information and arbitrarily influence parameters of the music any way we want if we think that the player is aware of this character being bummed out. So there were lots of really neat possibilities, and it was incredibly primitive in that I had to build I was literally coding this from scratch. I coded the audio engine and the decision-making system, and I wrote my own segue editor for creating segues between audio files. And for one iteration of the game where we were going for kind of a mini-game approach, kind of the precursor to modern mobile apps, I actually wrote a synthesizer just absolutely from scratch in C++, making the waveforms, and I wrote my own time scaling algorithms. So really stuff that no human being should ever have to write today because it's been done already and you just be tapping in a library. But it was fun.
More than fun. It sounds great. If anything, I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, why the heck am I using these middlewares when really what I should be doing is thinking about what can be done in just pure possibility. Because, when you work with a middleware tool, it gives you, all this stuff, and you sit inside that box for the duration of the project production. And those are the tools that you use. But I'm hearing you say, I coded this stuff using a Lisp-like language, using C++, making this stuff happen. And this is the mid-'90s, and it's, if you mentioned a lot of this stuff now, people would say, yeah, you're working on a really advanced game with advanced audio. And yeah, simple as that.
Mike, I didn't know that you had a coding background. I liked you before, but now.
I was actually a coder before I was a professional composer. I started as a kind of a hybrid guy who was doing what today we would just call audio implementation work with composition. Most of those terms didn't exist then. I was just hired by a startup game company, and I was the guy who knew anything about audio. So they just dropped a manual, and they said, learn how to program a Silicon Graphics workstation and such audio APIs that exist today. And we eventually moved to direct music, direct sound, but that was kind of the hoity-toity evolution of what we're doing. But I've actually backed away from, having been really into the depths of implementation, I've kind of backed away and been more pure music since then. So ironically, I'm less familiar with the state-of-the-art now than I was way back when, even though I think I was dealing with a lot of the same issues that everyone was talking about. The idea of an abstract sound. You're not playing a wave file, you're issuing an algorithm that takes into account 3D space and all these other parameters what you're walking on. And I was doing primitive versions of those same things, but just using the same programming language everyone was using. It was kind of on the same playing field as a lot of the developers, which was, again, it was really cool and incredibly primitive at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, have you ever done any coding?
Very little. I've done C# stuff for Unity. Yeah, and then basically just anything to get my sounds in the game. I learn enough to make the hooks. Yeah, that's about it. I've done some MaximSP programming, but I don't think that's on the same level. That's a lot easier to do. I'm more of a scripter than a programmer.
Enough to be dangerous.
Enough to be dangerous. I can break a game. I can break the shit out of a game.
One thing that I think is really cool as interactive music has evolved is the awareness on the developer side of the importance of audio implementation, and that tools like FModWise are known. You know, it's an issue of which of these things do you want to use. It's not what's implementation. I don't understand. Just give us your WAV files and we'll figure out to trigger them. And I've been in situations, fortunately, years ago, where I was making music for the game, and I knew the developers had some idea of what the implementation would be, but there's nothing in the design docs for it. I think they just thought it would magically happen towards the end. So I was being given all these specs, like this will happen during battle, and then this will happen during battle, and this, and this, and this, and this, and I've been writing music for these scenarios, and I knew that no person was assigned the job of making that happen. And I made the mistake of bringing this up way too late in the process. And guys, there's no glue between our vision and what I'm doing here. There's got to be someone with at least some if-then logic somewhere along the way. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. And we had this kind of very makeshift implementation that fortunately we were able to revisit in later games. But that time it was kind of uncomfortable, and it was like being in a car racing towards a wall. I knew there was nothing that could be done. So the situation seems much better today in terms of developer awareness of the importance of implementation and thinking about it from the get-go.
Absolutely, and that's very encouraging and inspiring as well. Especially, when the game designers have more ideas than you do about what they want done with the music, and what they want done with the sound. It's like we're in a very different era now than compared to as you said, where you just okay, just give us your sound effects and give us your music, and we'll figure out how it all goes together.
Here's a question for you three, or four, if Ba has anything to add to this as well. When you're working heavily with middleware, do you find there's a point where you've learned the tool so well that you can kind of think of it automatically without too much drain of your attention, and there you can compose music fairly fluidly because you're so reflexive in your use of the middleware tools. You don't have to constantly stop yourself artistically and say, how is this going to hook into what we're doing, in terms of FModWise? Does the cost, so I'm saying, does the mental cost of middleware drop so you can really act as composers or sound designers at some point without too much thought about the implementation?
I now design for the tool. Now that you can be very modular, I always have that in mind during my design process.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about the current capabilities of the game and the tool as in my case the FMod API and the tools that I've got, FMod Designer, and the various things that I've added on top of it. I think in my case I'm also constantly learning about it because I've got some ideas about, I want to actually change this, I want to add this feature on that. So yeah, there will be some music and sound where I think, okay, I'm just going to do this, I'm going to knock it out of the park, I'm going to finish it in an hour, that's all that I need in order to make this thing happen. But I'm also thinking about what else I can do in order to add on to the implementation, and because it's not just the middleware and its built-in editors for me, it's also the other stuff that I add on top of that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to leave in a sec, guys. But the answer to your question, Mike, is yes, because Wise is so capable in the way that it does things that, for better or for worse, you get very intoxicated in thinking about game audio in terms of Wise, for better or for worse. I mean, it is middleware, and therefore, as Vince said, for example, for me, for somebody who doesn't have the capability to code my own solutions, because I'm thinking in terms of the game audio in terms of Wise, the bad part of that is that, yes, it's more difficult to think outside the box, so to speak. Fortunately, Wise's box is really big. So there's so much scope inside that box that I personally have found haven't found a situation where I've sort of not seen other game audio solutions just because I'm thinking in terms of Wise. But the answer to your question then is that for me, at least after, I mean, I'm still learning Wise every day, and I've only been using it for 6 months. But it feels very, very seamless that I can be just creating the sound, the music, whatever, specifically put into Wise, thinking about the game project in terms of Wise, just because of that structure that it creates is so detailed, but it's so logical, and it makes so much sense once you understand it, that the transition between creation and implementation is very, very easy, very, very seamless. And with that, I will bid you fine gentlemen goodbye for another week.
Goodbye.
So yeah, so I'm gonna bow out now. So I'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
See you.
Ooh, that was well, I mean, we've already up on an hour talking a lot about audio implementation, just starting from a really simple example to, just general talking about FMod and Wise, and even a little bit of history. Oh, I really wish Alex was still here, because I would want to recommend him some pure data if he really wants to do just pure synth. And I know Wise has some great synth capability in there, but over the Christmas New Year break, I've been messing around with Unity and using pure data patches as my sound effects in a simple Unity game. And it's really cool, the stuff that you can do there with, infinite operator, infinite voice FM synth for your video game. Well, but I guess that's just me. I'll have to... wait a minute, did that go too? Oh, wow. I just totally missed this ending here. It's just you and me, Michael.
And Ba.
And Ba. Ba. Okay, Ba. Do you have anything to say, Ba? Okay. Well, hey, that was a pretty good show, I'd say. I guess it's time for us to sign off. So I will see you later.
We'll see you next week, and we'll all see you out there next week, and hopefully Kyle will be back with us.
Yeah. Get better, Kyle. Bye, guys.
See y'all later.